Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Joseph Schorr. Joseph is a Vice President of Strategic Alliances at LogicGate, which is a leading provider of cloud software solutions for governance, risk, and compliance processes. Joseph, thank you for coming again to our interview today.
Great to be back. I had a great time last time.
Thank you. Thank you. Last time we actually spoke with you in May this year, and one of the main points we discussed, we touched why risk managers should avoid the green dashboard disease, right? And why the higher they go in companies, the simpler questions are potentially disastrous for their career, because they used to think in difficult materials and kind of overcomplicate things. But on the board level, the questions actually very simple, and they expect from you very simple answers, right?
Yeah, simple and dangerous answers.
Yeah. All right. So today we will do a deep dive on a specific topic on how organizations can and should take a more holistic approach to vulnerability management. So according to the last report of this year from Checkpoint Cybersecurity, 3 out of 4 attacks took advantage of flaws that were reported in 2017 or even earlier. And many could have been prevented with a holistic vulnerability management approach. And many organizations still, they do some kind of vulnerability scanning, but just that is not enough. Joseph, can you perhaps tell us what is, in your opinion, constitutes a holistic vulnerability assessment, and what are critical components for such approach?
I think it sounds like a simple answer, but when you know you have a decent vulnerability management program, you don't have a whole lot of drama around your retesting, no matter when it is. If it's monthly, quarterly, yearly, typically the companies that find themselves in trouble, or they'll do the necessary minimum on scanning or whatever it may be, and usually they try and limit the scanning to really small sectioned off part of their environment. If they're doing it for PCI purposes, they'll work against the PCI environment, have everything kind of segmented off. The problem is that once they get those reports and get through kind of the audit period, the activity seems to fall off a bit. They either procrastinate, or it doesn't get assigned out to the correct business units. There's just not a lot of follow-up to it. So the good programs are the ones that, basically when they retest, those original findings are gone. They've been either mitigated, remediated, they figured out some way to deal with it. There's activity going on with it. I think that's the whole key to really what a vulnerability management program is you see activity. It's not a discrete project that happens monthly, quarterly, annually. It's a way of doing things. It becomes a business process unto itself.
Mm-hmm. So what are the best practices for implementing this complex approach, just to prevent failure from your experience?
Honestly, you need to take advantage of the fact that it's kind of weird. Like years ago, when I was actually doing vulnerability assessments and pen testing and ethical hacking and things like that, we used to worry that sometime in the future, all that was going to become very commoditized and we'd literally be out of a job. Like you wouldn't need pen testers and assessors and people like that anymore. That hasn't happened, but it has gotten commoditized. So now you've got pen testing, vulnerability assessment, things like that. The ability to go out and find the vulnerabilities in your environment is a lot faster, a lot easier, and a lot cheaper than it used to be. And people need to take advantage of that. It's instead of doing the bare minimum, go out and find a provider that can actually get you a much bigger view of your environment and do it correctly. And then the flip side of it is, that's call it pen testing as a service or vulnerability assessment as a service or something. And then the flip side is the risk management part of it, where you need to match up those vulnerabilities to what's happening in your business. You don't necessarily want to do penetration testing against every server in your environment, but you want to pick a sample out. You don't want to have the same kind of depth and breadth on every segment in your business. So you need to know your business really well. It's a very contextual thing, and then match up what your kind of risk appetite is and where you're worried about where the crown jewels may be, and work your way backwards, and then worry about those vulnerabilities first. So you can't do either one in a vacuum. You have to somehow be connecting all that vulnerability finding activity and all the risk management activity and all the interactions with the business units. That's literally where it always falls down. It just needs to become a business process that's linked together. And there's got to be something in the middle that connects that.
Mm-hmm. So we also in our community, global risk community, we have a site and a social network. So many people sometimes ask us, is it possible to defend my organizations against zero-day vulnerabilities, public disclosures, and other untouchable situations?
It is because if somebody has enough time, resources, money, expertise, they can probably get to anything. But I mean, that's a really, really targeted, heavy duty, a lot of times state sponsored type of thing, like a Stuxnet attack. That took months, if not years, to develop. It took people in multiple countries. It took access at a lab level to the equipment that they were going to attack. They used multiple 0 days. They had to do social engineering and get people on the scene to, walk a thumb drive into the nuclear facility. It's pretty intense. The basic 0 days are out there when somebody finds something just hasn't been discovered before. If you're doing other best practices and following everybody talks about defense in depth till we're sick of it, but if you're following good standard security architecture design, have a decent security posture, then the 0 day risk becomes less. All you're ever trying to do is lessen your risk, and get closer and closer to zero. It's really hard. It's like one of those things. If you try and draw a line and start putting marks halfway to the destination, you never really get to the end. It's almost impossible to completely insulate yourself that way. But following general good security policies, procedures, risk management policies and procedures, you can put up enough friction that it becomes much more difficult.
Mm-hmm. Another more popular question we have in our community is, how do we protect sensitive information handled and stored by third-party vendors?
Oh, that's that's one of my favorite topics. So
yeah, exactly.
There's I honestly think, and it's one of my favorite topics. It's the one that probably makes me sadder than any other one, because we've been talking about it since, I don't know. I mean, as long as I've been doing this stuff, which goes back to the early 90s, a lot of attention is given to insider threats. And my opinion has always been that anybody you do business with on a pretty intimate level is basically an insider. Like if you give them any kind of access to your environment in any way, shape, or form, then they're a potential insider threat, which raises the risk level immediately. And then the really difficult thing gets to be, and I thought about this the other day when talking to a third-party risk vendor, a different company, and they were showing how, you've got your discrete suppliers. You make, I don't know, you're a vendor for General Motors and you make brake pads. Well, your suppliers are the asbestos company, a steel company, a company that makes screws, there's a glue company, there's packaging, all those companies. So even when you do your due diligence and you've got a decent third-party program in place, you're worrying about what their risk may be. They also have vendors connected to them. So it starts to look like it's not just it's almost like a sales pipeline. Like everybody talks about sales, like you have lots of potential customers out there and hopefully you'll get some of them. that whole third-party vendor risk, supply chain risk thing is a lot like a pipeline, but it's like a pipeline that gets bigger and bigger as it goes out. Like those risks increase because you need to now worry about 2 and 3 and 4 levels deep, what's actually happening way out there in the vendors environment. So if you have a really good policy set for all your Apache stuff is up to date, and you do a search for, you ask all your vendors, are all your Apache boxes up to date? Yeah, it's great. But then they're connected to a bunch of other people. So you really need to dig in really, really deep, because quite frankly, that's what the attackers are doing. They go for the weak member of the herd, and third-party attacks are almost invariably somebody that has a weaker security posture than the other ones. I mean, why would they go after the tough target? Even Target, the Target breach was one of the most famous at its time, and that came through a little mom and pop heating and air conditioning company that you never think in a million. It always reminds me, as people say, like, well, we would never be a target. Like, we don't spend a lot of money on security. Like, who would ever want to hack us? There's lots of people that would because of who you're connected to, and that's what makes it scary. And that's why I love talking about third-party risk, because I think it's absolutely fundamental to nail that down. And it goes right back to vulnerability management. You've got to worry about you have to worry about your vulnerability management, creating a great program, and then starting to insist that the people you do business with are doing the same thing.
So I would like to ask you a personal opinion. What is a commonly held belief or misconception in the field of vulnerability management that you strongly disagree with?
That a vulnerability management program means you test once a quarter, once a year, and you've got a vulnerability management program because you do the actual test, you get the findings, and the security people work on trying to figure out which ones to remediate. To me, that's scratching the surface, but it's not where it needs to be. When I see a healthy vulnerability management program, it looks a lot more like continuous risk monitoring. The vulns are part of it, but it's built into a philosophy of, at any given moment, you can see sort of what the status is of what's going on in your security environment. It shouldn't be a once a year, the auditors are coming, we need to clean things up real fast. Okay, the auditors are gone. Thank God, we can take a break. Now, the 2 weeks after the auditors leave is when everybody goes on vacation. That's fantastic. It shouldn't be that way. When you have an audit, or you have an assessment or something coming up, it shouldn't be a big draw. You should almost be able to predict what they're going to find if your program is healthy. You hopefully won't be in criticals, but you may say, yeah, we know you're going to find a high risk finding in that VLAN over there that has these 3 boxes, because we've isolated that off. We know the risk. We've taken mitigating steps for it, and we have a plan to update it, patch it, replace it, whatever it may be, change the configuration. That's when you have a healthy plan in place.
And does cyber insurance help in this situation? For example, what do they require? Do they require that company have a specific program intact, or they just a sign check for every incident?
Yeah, I think it's I have kind of a theory that the same companies I dealt with a decade ago that were really fond of signing things called risk acceptance letters, they would get somebody in the organization to say, yeah, sure, we accept that risk. It's okay. Like, they know there's something really bad going on, but they make a business decision that we're just going to keep doing things the way we do it and hope that we can put it off another year until the next audit. Some of the decision making goes behind buying insurance reminds me of that. It's almost there's places out there that they do a cost benefit analysis and they figure out, well, okay, if we get hit, the insurance will pay it. It's kind of like your car has problems with the steering, but you've got really good coverage on the car. If you bump into somebody in the parking lot, I'll have to pay my deductible and be on my way. But and that's unfortunately how I think some people look at it. And to get the insurance, it is a little bit like you say, kind of that checkboxy. If you meet the underwriter's criterion, taking the steps they say to take to get your policy, then you kind of have this. Okay, well, we got the insurance now. We can worry about it next year.
Mhm.
And that's fatal.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah.
I think that said, I think people should have the insurance policies. I just don't think that your insurance policy should drive your security posture.
Mhm. So there are numerous tools and services available today to bring cybersecurity in-house. So how can, for example, CISOs determine what capabilities should be in-house and what should be outsourced?
It sounds like I'm making up kind of a trite answer, but they should probably get like some consulting help or someone to help them do a basic tools assessment. One of the most useful things I saw in the past probably 5-ish years is a trend towards companies offering to help you with a tools assessment. Like really look at what you already have. People complain about their budgets all the time. They're not getting enough money for security, or not getting enough for this and that, or general IT. And a lot of times they're leaving a ton of money on the table because they may have bought things that are sitting as shelfware and they're paying maintenance fees and everything else when they're really not getting any use out of it. Or they may have duplicate functions. I mean, how many different antivirus or endpoint solutions do you need in the company? So I think a really good tools assessment is vital. And usually it's like you can't edit your own work when you write an article. You probably need some outside help to do that tools assessment. Once you get that, then you can start to make some sane and rational decisions about moving forward. You may find that you have just about everything you need. You're not using it the right way. You didn't buy enough of it. You bought too much of it. You don't have the right people in place to see what's on the screen. Years ago, that going back to Target, they had FireEye in place, and the board was figuratively lighting up red, like there's something bad happening. But it was kind of like there was nobody at the wheel to decipher it or do anything about it, or a process wasn't there to go from A to Z and get the thing fixed. So in a lot of cases, I think companies may have a little bit of what they need already. And then once they get that kind of baseline of the tools down and the solutions, then they can start to go out, and then they're making rational decisions about what they need. It's not just, I used to call it buying by RSA. You go to RSA every spring and you have the map of the showroom floor and you circle all the booths where you want to go talk to people and find out what their stuff does. And then 6 months later, you're buying their products. That's not the way to create a security architecture. You need to figure out what works best for your business.
Mm-hmm. So what about kind of metrics and maturity? Is there a benchmark for this vulnerability assessment? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to when we talked last time about how do you quantify things and go, when the board says, are we doing good or bad? What the heck is good or bad mean? It's weird because when you look at vulnerabilities, you think it's easy to get metrics because you literally have a number down there. And again, that tends to fall into that green dashboard disease because, companies or people inside the company will tend to report up, well, we had, X amount of vulnerabilities last quarter, and we have this many this quarter, so we're doing better now. When in reality, they're not taking into account the business part of it. Where do those vulnerabilities reside? What's the severity of them related to the business impact? So I still think that companies are tending to measure and use the metrics we have in a little bit of a vacuum. We're now finally getting to the age of risk quantification, which I think is really, really, really where we're going to start to marry up risk and business risk, which are different things. You know, that's been the number one question I've gotten from clients over the past few years was, in a general sense, you know, how do we're getting better at security and getting better at cybersecurity or cyber risk. But then, you know, we have a whole risk department over here that does our business risk. How do these two worlds talk to each other and how do you match it up? And I think we're getting to that point now, which again is going to help a lot. It's I think you know, the sexy parts of the industry, the hacking and the offensive security, a lot of that has gotten commoditized. And now I think we're at the dawn of the age where the kind of drier parts of this are finally become really important. You know, operationalizing a lot of things you do, matching things up with the business side of the house. Again, it should be, cybersecurity should be run like any other business unit inside a company. You know, it's got HR, it's got marketing, it's got sales, you know, it has production, it has product management. It needs to run efficiently.
Okay, interesting. So I ask this question all my guests because I run this a global risk community. We have about in total 100,000 people on our platform, and I would like to ask you, what should we do to better kind of improve lives of risk managers and cybersecurity professionals?
That is a great, man, that's a great question. I got to think about that. Again, to me, it comes down to, like I said, removing that drama from their lives. Like every audit season shouldn't be some kind of a circus act. You know, in sales, it's always that last couple of weeks of the year, which if you have a calendar sales year, it's right around Christmas time and everybody's losing their mind at the worst time you could possibly have. And you're trying to shove everything through at the last instance. So what happens a lot of time now, you know, when it's audit season or there's assessors coming around, everybody has a fire drill and tries to either sweep things under the rug, temporarily stand things up to make it look okay, fix stuff. Like it's nuts. So I think the biggest way to remove some of that stress is to get to like a continuous monitoring type of model where you're always gonna have surprises and bad things happen. Critical stuff's always gonna pop up, but it should pop up a lot less frequently. And then you're able to put it into your, you know, incident response plan and go after it, you know, in a planned way. It shouldn't just be a complete and utter fire drill every time. So getting closer and closer to giving risk managers and cybersecurity managers, everybody living that life, that ability to live in a continuous monitoring world, I guess you would call it, to me is really important.
Okay, so to finalize, for anyone who is listening to this interview, what would you give as one or two major takeaways for them out of this interview?
We didn't talk much about assets, but I think probably asset classification, making sure, it sounds really silly, but a lot of times companies really can't identify where their, you know, the crown jewels are or the Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe resides for your company. And it used to be, like I said, companies would argue that, you know, nobody would possibly want to hack us. You know, we don't have anything to steal. Well, the crown jewels for that may be the assets associated with how you connect to Walmart, because somebody may use you to go attack someone else and you're going to wind up getting sued. So that may be your important assets. So classifying the assets, getting governance around the entire process, you know, having a way to follow, you know, doing the vulnerability stuff should be pretty commoditized by now. You know, you can get it done well, you can get it done relatively inexpensively, you get really good results. But getting those results and attributing them to the proper business units and who really needs to fix it, and pinning a body down to that remediation exercise, that whole governance plan has to be put into place. And then I'd say the third thing is making it a honest to God, you know, 24/7, 365 all year long effort, not having this be a once a year, 4 times a year, or monthly exercise, but making the vulnerability management program just part of how, it's the cost of doing business, because it is. Everybody agrees it's really important, but for some reason people push back on giving it attention on a continuous manner.
Okay, great, thank you. And maybe if that were all my questions. If I forgot something that you think that will benefit audience, to add something.
No, I think as usual, awesome interview. It's great to see you again. No, very happy.
Thank you, Joseph, and I wish you and your company great success. And I know you are in the news doing some great stuff. So hopefully we will see you in a few months again on our show.
Absolutely. Thanks, Boris.
Thank you. Let me check.